1976, something started appearing in bottles of Schlitz, America's most famous lager. White flakes, floating in the liquid. Getting worse the longer the beer sat on shelves. Consumers called it snot. Some called it mucus. Bars started refusing deliveries. This was the beer that made Milwaukee famous, now becoming America's brewing nightmare. Within 6 months, Schlitz recalled 10 million bottles. Cost $1.4 million. But the real cost? Schlitz lost 90% of its brand value in less than a decade. From America's #1 beer to a cautionary tale of cost-cutting, brand equity destruction, and quality control failure taught in business schools today. This is the story of how a chemistry experiment destroyed a brewing empire, and you probably drank it. Let's go back to when Schlitz owned American beer. 1849. August Krug establishes a small brewery in Milwaukee. By 1902, the Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company becomes the largest beer producer in the United States. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, they trade that #1 spot back and forth with Anheuser-Busch. Their slogan becomes part of American culture, the beer that made Milwaukee famous. By the late 1950s, Schlitz holds the #2 position behind Budweiser. But they're still massive. We're talking about one of the most recognized American lager brands in America. Blue-collar workers, returning soldiers, your grandfather, everyone knew Schlitz. In 1967, Robert Uihlein Jr. becomes chairman of the board, Harvard graduate, championship polo player, 4th generation of the Uihlein family to run the company. And he has a vision. If Schlitz can't outsell Budweiser, it can at least be more profitable through aggressive cost-cutting. That decision would destroy the company. Here's what Uihlein was facing. Beer takes time to make properly. In the late 1960s, Budweiser was aging their American adjunct lager for 32 to 40 days. That's over a month per batch. Schlitz? They were aging for about 25 days. But even that wasn't fast enough for Uihlein's profit margins. In 1967, Schlitz introduces something they'd been developing for 10 years: accelerated batch fermentation. They cut fermentation time from 25 days down to 21, then down to 15. Some sources say they got it down to just 2 days for certain processes. They also started using high-gravity brewing, making a much stronger beer, then diluting it with water before bottling. More efficient, cheaper. But there was a problem with this rushed fermentation process. When you rush fermentation, proteins don't have time to settle out naturally through protein coagulation. The beer develops what's called chill haze. It looks cloudy, especially when cold. And cloudy beer looks old, stale, like something's wrong with it. Distributors started complaining. Bars didn't want hazy American lager on their shelves, so Schlitz had to fix the haze problem. The traditional solution? Let the beer age longer so proteins settle naturally. But that defeats the whole purpose of speeding up production. Instead, Schlitz added silica gel, a beer clarification agent. Silica gel is a desiccant. You've seen those little packets that say, "Do not eat" in shoeboxes. In beer, it binds to the haze-forming proteins and pulls them out through colloidal instability. The beer stays crystal clear. Anheuser-Busch didn't need silica gel because they aged their beer properly, natural protein settling. But Schlitz was in too deep now. They needed that chemical fix. And it worked, for a while. Then the Food and Drug Administration dropped a bomb. In 1976, there was growing concern that the FDA would require ingredient disclosure regulations for all beer ingredients to be listed on bottles and cans. Everything would have to be disclosed under new food labeling requirements. Schlitz panicked. If consumers saw silica gel on the label next to Budweiser's all-natural ingredients, it would look terrible. Anheuser-Busch would have a field day with it. So Schlitz made a switch. They replaced the silica gel with something called Chill-Lagarde, another anti-haze agent and beer clarification compound. The key difference? Chill-Lagarde could be filtered out at the end of production. That meant it was technically a processing aid, not an ingredient. No disclosure required under ingredient disclosure regulations. Here's where the chemistry went wrong. Schlitz was already using a foam stabilizer called Calcaloid, a brand of propylene glycol alginate, basically a seaweed-derived chemical that keeps that thick, creamy head on your beer. Pretty standard in the American lager industry. Nobody at Schlitz knew what would happen when Chill-Lagarde met chelcolloid, propylene glycol alginate, in the same tank. The two chemicals reacted. The Chill-Lagarde bonded with the chelcolloid. The foam stabilizer began to crystallize through unexpected colloidal instability, and those crystals formed flakes, white flakes, visible flakes, floating in America's #1 lager. The longer the beer sat on shelves, the worse it got. The flakes would clump together, form stringy, mucus-like substances. Imagine opening a cold Schlitz after a long day. You pour it, and there's white slime floating in your glass. This wasn't a small problem. This was every bottle, every can, nationwide. Schlitz knew about the problem early, but instead of immediately pulling the product and alerting the public, they tried to handle it quietly. They attempted to recall and destroy bad batches in secret. They hoped to fix it before anyone noticed. But you can't hide something like that. Bars noticed, distributors noticed. Most importantly, consumers noticed. Reports started flooding in across the country. By mid-1976, it became impossible to ignore. Finally, Schlitz issued the recall, 10 million bottles and cans. The immediate cost was $1.4 million. That's about $7.5 million in today's money. But the brand damage? Incalculable. Schlitz's desperate solution made it worse. They decided to remove the chelcolloid entirely. No foam stabilizer means no flakes, right? Problem solved? No. Now the American lager went flat immediately. Schlitz beer lost its head. Pour a fresh Schlitz and watch it go dead flat in seconds. From snot beer to flat beer, the brand was bleeding out. The numbers tell the story of this brand equity destruction. 1974. Schlitz is the #2 brewery in America, right behind Budweiser. 1977. Miller Brewing Company passes Schlitz. They drop to third. 1978. Schlitz ships 19.6 million barrels, down from 22.1 million the year before. Market share falls to 12.1%. Profits drop 46%. By 1980, Schlitz falls to 4th place. Miller Brewing Company and Pabst have both overtaken them. In a desperate attempt to win back customers, Schlitz launched new advertising in 1977. The Leo Burnett Agency created a campaign where rugged men aggressively defended their Schlitz against off-screen voices trying to get them to switch brands. The ads were supposed to be funny. Instead, they came across as menacing. Viewers felt threatened. The industry dubbed it, "Drink Schlitz or I'll kill you." The campaign lasted 10 weeks before Schlitz pulled it. Robert Uihlein Jr. died in November 1976, right in the middle of the disaster he created. He never saw the final collapse. 1981, Schlitz closes its Milwaukee brewery. 1982, Stroh Brewery Company buys Schlitz for $500 million. Analysts estimate Schlitz lost more than 90% of its brand value between 1974 and 1982. The beer that made Milwaukee famous became the chemistry experiment that destroyed it. Today, the Schlitz brand still exists. Pabst Brewing Company bought it in 1999. In 2008, they even reconstructed the original 1960s American lager recipe, the one that existed before all the cost-cutting began. Some beer enthusiasts say it's actually good again, but it will never recover what it lost. Here's what you need to understand. Those flakes in your beer in 1976? That wasn't mold. That wasn't contamination. That was industrial chemistry gone wrong. Two beer clarification agents that had never been combined before, meeting in the same tank. Creating a chemical reaction through colloidal instability nobody predicted. You weren't crazy for thinking something was off. You were drinking a failed experiment. And every time a company tells you they're improving efficiency or modernizing production, remember Schlitz. Remember what happens when profit margins matter more than the product, because that lesson cost a billion-dollar brand everything.